Ocean acidification is the ongoing decrease in the pH of the Earth's oceans, caused by the uptake of carbon dioxide, CO2, from the atmosphere. An estimated 30–40% of the carbon dioxide released by humans into the atmosphere dissolves into oceans, rivers and lakes. To achieve chemical equilibrium, some of it reacts with the water to form carbonic acid. Some of these extra carbonic acid molecules react with a water molecule to give a bicarbonate ion and a hydronium ion, thus increasing ocean acidity. Between 1751 and 1994, surface ocean pH is estimated to have decreased from approximately 8.25 to 8.14, representing an increase of almost 30% in H+ ion concentration in the world's oceans. Earth system models project that within the last decade ocean acidity exceeded historical analogues, and in combination with other ocean biogeochemical changes could undermine the functioning of marine ecosystems and many ocean goods and services. Increasing acidity is thought to have a range of possibly harmful consequences, such as depressing metabolic rates and immune responses in some organisms, and causing coral bleaching. This also causes decreasing oxygen levels as it kills off algae. Other chemical reactions are triggered which result in a net decrease in the amount of carbonate ions available. This makes it more difficult for marine calcifying organisms, such as coral and some plankton, to form biogenic calcium carbonate, and such structures become vulnerable to dissolution. Ongoing acidification of the oceans threatens food chains connected with the oceans. As members of the Inter-Academy Panel, 105 science academies have issued a statement on ocean acidification recommending that by 2050, global CO2 emissions be reduced by at least 50% compared to the 1990 level. Ocean acidification has occurred previously in Earth's history. The most notable example is the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, which occurred approximately 56 million years ago. For reasons that are currently uncertain, massive amounts of carbon entered the ocean and atmosphere, and led to the dissolution of carbonate sediments in all ocean basins. Carbon cycle. The carbon cycle describes the fluxes of carbon dioxide, CO2, between the oceans, terrestrial biosphere, lithosphere, and the atmosphere. Human activities such as the combustion of fossil fuels and land use changes have led to a new flux of CO2 into the atmosphere. About 45% has remained in the atmosphere. Most of the rest has been taken up by the oceans, with some taken up by terrestrial plants. The carbon cycle involves both organic compounds such as cellulose and inorganic carbon compounds such as carbon dioxide and the carbonates. The inorganic compounds are particularly relevant when discussing ocean acidification, for it includes many forms of dissolved CO2 present in the Earth's oceans. When CO2 dissolves, it reacts with water to form a balance of ionic and non-ionic chemical species, dissolved free carbon dioxide, CO2, AC, carbonic acid, H2 3, bicarbonate, HCOA, 3, and carbonate, CO2A, 3. The ratio of these species depends on factors such as seawater temperature and alkalinity. These different forms of dissolved inorganic carbon are transferred from an ocean's surface to its interior by the ocean's solubility pump. The resistance of an area of ocean to absorbing atmospheric CO2 is known as the Revel factor. Acidification, dissolving CO2 in seawater increases the hydrogen ion concentration in the ocean, and thus decreases ocean pH, as follows: CO2 plus H2O H2CO3 HCO3A plus H plus CO32A plus 2 hours plus. Caldera and Wickett place the rate and magnitude of modern ocean acidification changes in the context of probable historical changes during the last 300 million years. Since the Industrial Revolution began, it is estimated that surface ocean pH has dropped by slightly more than 0.1 units on the logarithmic scale of pH, representing about a 29% increase in H+. It is expected to drop by a further 0.3 to 0.5 pH units by 2100 as the oceans absorb more anthropogenic CO2, the impacts being most severe for coral reefs in the Southern Ocean. These changes are predicted to continue rapidly as the oceans take up more anthropogenic CO2 CO2 from the atmosphere. The degree of change to ocean chemistry, including ocean pH, will depend on the mitigation and emissions pathways society takes. Although the largest changes are expected in the future, a report from NOAA scientists found large quantities of water undersaturated in aragonite are already upwelling close to the Pacific continental shelf area of North America. Continental shelves play an important role in marine ecosystems since most marine organisms live or are spawned there, and though the study only dealt with the area from Vancouver to Northern California, the authors suggest that other shelf areas may be experiencing similar effects. Rate: one of the first detailed data sets to examine how pH varied over a period of time at a temperate coastal location found that acidification was occurring much faster than previously predicted, with consequences for nearshore benthic ecosystems. Thomas Lovejoy, former chief biodiversity advisor to the World Bank, has suggested that the acidity of the oceans will more than double in the next 40 years. This rate is 100 times faster than any changes in ocean acidity in the last 20 million years, making it unlikely that marine life can somehow adapt to the changes. It is predicted that, by the year 2100, the level of acidity in the ocean will reach the levels experienced by the Earth 20 million years ago. Current rates of ocean acidification have been compared with a greenhouse event at the Paleocene-Eocene boundary when surface ocean temperatures rose by 5–6 degrees Celsius. No catastrophe was seen in surface ecosystems, yet bottom-dwelling organisms in the deep ocean experienced a major extinction. The current acidification is on a path to reach levels higher than any seen in the last 65 million years, and the rate of increase is about 10 times the rate that preceded the Paleocene-Eocene mass extinction. The current and projected acidification has been described as an almost unprecedented geological event. A National Research Council study released in April 2010 likewise concluded that the level of acid in the oceans is increasing at an unprecedented rate. A 2012 paper in the journal Science examined the geological record in an attempt to find a historical analogue for current global conditions as well as those of the future. The researchers determined that the current rate of ocean acidification is faster than at any time in the past 300 million years. A review by climate scientists at the Real Climate blog, of a 2005 report by the Royal Society of the UK similarly highlighted the centrality of the rates of change in the present anthropogenic acidification process, writing, "The natural pH of the ocean is determined by a need to balance the deposition and burial of CaCO3 on the seafloor against the influx of Ca2+ and CO2 into the ocean from dissolving rocks on land, called weathering. These processes stabilize the pH of the ocean, by a mechanism called CaCO3 compensation. The point of bringing it up again is to note that if the CO2 concentration of the atmosphere changes more slowly than this, as it always has throughout the Vostok record, the pH of the ocean will be relatively unaffected because CaCO3 compensation can keep up. The present fossil fuel acidification is much faster than natural changes, and so the acid spike will be more intense than the Earth has seen in at least 800,000 years. In the 15-year period 1995–2010 alone, acidity has increased 6% in the upper 100 meters of the Pacific Ocean from Hawaii to Alaska. According to a statement in July 2012 by Jane Lubchenco, head of the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, surface waters are changing much more rapidly than initial calculations have suggested. It's yet another reason to be very seriously concerned about the amount of carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere now and the additional amount we continue to put out. A 2013 study claimed acidity was increasing at a rate 10 times faster than in any of the evolutionary crises in the Earth's history. Calcification, overview. Changes in ocean chemistry can have extensive direct and indirect effects on organisms and their habitats. One of the most important repercussions of increasing ocean acidity relates to the production of shells and plates out of calcium carbonate, CaCO3. This process is called calcification and is important to the biology and survival of a wide range of marine organisms. Calcification involves the precipitation of dissolved ions into solid CaCO3 structures, such as coccoliths. After they are formed, such structures are vulnerable to dissolution unless the surrounding seawater contains saturating concentrations of carbonate ions. Mechanism. Of the extra carbon dioxide added into the oceans, some remains as dissolved carbon dioxide, while the rest contributes towards making additional bicarbonate. This also increases the concentration of hydrogen ions, and the percentage increase in hydrogen is larger than the percentage increase in bicarbonate, creating an imbalance in the reaction HCO3 CO32 plus H+. To maintain chemical equilibrium, some of the carbonate ions already in the ocean combine with some of the hydrogen ions to make further bicarbonate. Thus the ocean's concentration of carbonate ions is reduced, creating an imbalance in the reaction Ca2 plus CO32 Carco3, and making the dissolution of formed Carco3 structures more likely. These increases in concentrations of dissolved carbon dioxide and bicarbonate, and reduction in carbonate, are shown in Abgeron plot. Saturation state. The saturation state of seawater for a mineral is a measure of the thermodynamic potential for the mineral to form or to dissolve, and is described by the following equation. Here I copyright is the product of the concentrations of the reacting ions that form the mineral, Ca2 plus and CO2 3, divided by the product of the concentrations of those ions when the mineral is at equilibrium, K, Sp, that is, when the mineral is neither forming nor dissolving. In seawater, a natural horizontal boundary is formed as a result of temperature, pressure, and depth, and is known as the saturation horizon, or lysocline. Above this saturation horizon, I copyright has a value greater than 1, and Carco3 does not readily dissolve. Most calcifying organisms live in such waters. Below this depth, I copyright has a value less than 1, and Carco3 will dissolve. However, if its production rate is high enough to offset dissolution, Carco3 can still occur where I copyright is less than 1. The carbonate compensation depth occurs at the depth in the ocean where production is exceeded by dissolution. The decrease in the concentration of CO32 decreases I copyright, and hence makes Carco3 dissolution more likely. Calcium carbonate occurs in two common polymorphs, aragonite and calcite. Aragonite is much more soluble than calcite, so the aragonite saturation horizon is always nearer to the surface than the calcite saturation horizon. This also means that those organisms that produce aragonite may be more vulnerable to changes in ocean acidity than those that produce calcite. Increasing company, 2 levels and the resulting lower pH of seawater decreases the saturation state of Carco3 and raises the saturation horizons of both forms closer to the surface. This decrease in saturation state is believed to be one of the main factors leading to decreased calcification in marine organisms, as the inorganic precipitation of Carco3 is directly proportional to its saturation state. Possible impacts. Increasing acidity has possibly harmful consequences, such as depressing metabolic rates in jumbo squid, depressing the immune responses of blue mussels, and coral bleaching. However, it may benefit some species, for example increasing the growth rate of the sea star, Pisosterocraceus, while shell plankton species may flourish in altered oceans. The report Ocean Acidification Summary for Policymakers 2013 describes research findings and possible impacts. Impacts on oceanic calcifying organisms. Although the natural absorption of CO2 by the world's oceans helps mitigate the climatic effects of anthropogenic emissions of CO2, it is believed that the resulting decrease in pH will have negative consequences, primarily for oceanic calcifying organisms. These span the food chain from autotrophs to heterotrophs and include organisms such as coccolithophores, corals, foraminifera, echinoderms, crustaceans and mollusks. As described above, under normal conditions, calcite and aragonite are stable in surface water since the carbonate ion is at supersaturating concentrations. However, as ocean pH falls, the concentration of carbonate ions required for saturation to occur increases, and when carbonate becomes undersaturated, structures made of calcium carbonate are vulnerable to dissolution. Therefore, even if there is no change in the rate of calcification, the rate of dissolution of calcareous material increases. Corals, Coccolithophore algae, coralline algae, foraminifera, shellfish and pteropods experience reduced calcification or enhanced dissolution when exposed to elevated CO2. The Royal Society published a comprehensive overview of ocean acidification, and its potential consequences, in June 2005. However, some studies have found different response to ocean acidification, with Coccolithophore calcification and photosynthesis both increasing under elevated atmospheric PCO2, an equal decline in primary production and calcification in response to elevated CO2 or the direction of the response varying between species. A study in 2008 examining a sediment core from the North Atlantic found that while the species composition of Coccolithophorids has remained unchanged for the industrial period 1780 to 2004, the calcification of coccoliths has increased by up to 40% during the same time. A 2010 study from Stony Brook University suggested that while some areas are overharvested and other fishing grounds are being restored, because of ocean acidification it may be impossible to bring back many previous shellfish populations. While the full ecological consequences of these changes in calcification are still uncertain, it appears likely that many calcifying species will be adversely affected. When exposed in experiments to pH reduced by 0.2 to 0.4, larvae of a temperate brittle star, a relative of the common sea star, fewer than 0.1% survived more than 8 days. There is also a suggestion that a decline in the Coccolithophores may have secondary effects on climate, contributing to global warming by decreasing the Earth's albedo via their effects on oceanic cloud cover. All marine ecosystems on Earth will be exposed to changes in acidification and several other ocean biogeochemical changes. The fluid in the internal compartments where corals grow their exoskeleton is also extremely important for calcification growth. When the saturation rate of aragonite in the external seawater is at ambient levels, the corals will grow their aragonite crystals rapidly in their internal compartments, hence their exoskeleton grows rapidly. If the level of aragonite in the external seawater is lower than the ambient level, the corals have to work harder to maintain the right balance in the internal compartment. When that happens, the process of growing the crystals slows down, and this slows down the rate of how much their exoskeleton is growing. Depending on how much aragonite is in the surrounding water, the corals may even stop growing because the levels of aragonite are too low to pump into the internal compartment. They could even dissolve faster than they can make the crystals to their skeleton, depending on the aragonite levels in the surrounding water. Ocean acidification may force some organisms to reallocate resources away from productive endpoints such as growth in order to maintain calcification. Other biological impacts, aside from the slowing and/or reversing of calcification, organisms may suffer other adverse effects either indirectly through negative impacts on food resources, or directly as reproductive or physiological effects. For example, the elevated oceanic levels of CO2 may produce CO2-induced acidification of body fluids, known as hypercapnia. Also, increasing ocean acidity is believed to have a range of direct consequences. For example, increasing acidity has been observed to reduce metabolic rates in jumbo squid, depress the immune responses of blue mussels, and make it harder for juvenile clownfish to tell apart the smells of non-predators and predators, or hear the sounds of their predators. This is possibly because ocean acidification may alter the acoustic properties of seawater, allowing sound to propagate further, and increasing ocean noise. This impacts all animals that use sound for echolocation or communication. Atlantic longfin squid eggs took longer to hatch in acidified water, and the squid's otolith was smaller and malformed in animals placed in seawater with a lower pH. However, as with calcification, as yet there is not a full understanding of these processes in marine organisms or ecosystems. Known biological impacts, leaving aside direct biological effects, it is expected that ocean acidification in the future will lead to a significant decrease in the burial of carbonate sediments for several centuries, and even the dissolution of existing carbonate sediments. This will cause an elevation of ocean alkalinity, leading to the enhancement of the ocean as a reservoir for CO2 2 with implications for climate change as more CO2 leaves the atmosphere for the ocean. Impact on human industry. The threat of acidification includes a decline in commercial fisheries and in the Arctic tourism industry and economy. Commercial fisheries are threatened because acidification harms calcifying organisms which form the base of the Arctic food webs. Pteropods and brittle stars both form the base of the Arctic food webs and are both seriously damaged from acidification. Pteropods' shells dissolve with increasing acidification and the brittle stars lose muscle mass when regrowing appendages. For pteropods to create shells they require aragonite which is produced through carbonate ions and dissolved calcium. Pteropods are severely affected because increasing acidification levels have steadily decreased the amount of water supersaturated with carbonate which is needed for aragonite creation. Arctic waters are changing so rapidly that they will become undersaturated with aragonite as early as 2016. Additionally, the brittle star's eggs die within a few days when exposed to expected conditions resulting from Arctic acidification. Acidification threatens to destroy Arctic food webs from the base up. Arctic food webs are considered simple, meaning there are few steps in the food chain from small organisms to larger predators. For example, pteropods are a key prey item of a number of higher predators, larger plankton, fish, seabirds, whales. Both pteropods and sea stars serve as a substantial food source and their removal from the simple food web would pose a serious threat to the whole ecosystem. The effects on the calcifying organisms at the base of the food webs could potentially destroy fisheries. The value of fish caught from U.S. commercial fisheries in 2007 was valued at $3.8 billion and of that 73% was derived from calcifiers and their direct predators. Other organisms are directly harmed as a result of acidification. For example, decrease in the growth of marine calcifiers such as the American lobster, ocean quahog, and scallops means there is less shellfish meat available for sale and consumption. Red king crab fisheries are also at a serious threat because crabs are calcifiers and rely on carbonate ions for shell development. Baby red king crab when exposed to increased acidification levels experienced 100% mortality after 95 days. In 2006 red king crab accounted for 23% of the total guideline harvest levels and a serious decline in red crab population would threaten the crab harvesting industry. Several ocean goods and services are likely to be undermined by future ocean acidification, potentially affecting the livelihoods of some 400 to 800 million people depending upon the emission scenario. Impact on indigenous peoples. Acidification could damage the Arctic tourism economy and affect the way of life of indigenous peoples. A major pillar of Arctic tourism is the sport fishing and hunting industry. The sport fishing industry is threatened by collapsing food webs which provide food for the prized fish. A decline in tourism lowers revenue input in the area, and threatens the economies that are increasingly dependent on tourism. Acidification is not merely a threat but has significantly declined whole fish populations. For example, in Scandinavia studies conducted on acidic water revealed that 15% of species populations had disappeared and that many more populations were limited in numbers or declining. The rapid decrease or disappearance of marine life could also affect the diet of indigenous peoples. Possible responses: reducing company to emissions. Members of the Inter-Academy panel recommended that by 2050, global anthropogenic CO2 emissions be reduced less than 50% of the 1990 level. The 2009 statement also called on world leaders to acknowledge that ocean acidification is a direct and real consequence of increasing atmospheric CO2 concentrations, is already having an effect at current concentrations, and is likely to cause grave harm to important marine ecosystems as CO2 concentrations reach 450 parts per million and above. Recognize that reducing the buildup of CO2 in the atmosphere is the only practicable solution to mitigating ocean acidification. Reinvigorate action to reduce stresses, such as overfishing and pollution, on marine ecosystems to increase resilience to ocean acidification. Stabilizing atmospheric company. 2 concentrations at 450 ppm would require near-term emissions reductions, with steeper reductions over time. the German Advisory Council on Global Change stated. In order to prevent disruption of the calcification of marine organisms and the resultant risk of fundamentally altering marine food webs, the following guardrail should be obeyed. The pH of near-surface waters should not drop more than 0.2 units below the pre-industrial average value in any larger ocean region. One policy target related to ocean acidity is the magnitude of future global warming. Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change adopted a target of limiting warming to below 2°C degrees Celsius, relative to the pre-industrial level. Meeting this target would require substantial reductions in anthropogenic CO2 emissions. Limiting global warming to below 2°C degrees Celsius would imply a reduction in surface ocean pH of 0.16 from pre-industrial levels. This would represent a substantial decline in surface ocean pH. Climate engineering. Climate engineering has been proposed as a possible response to ocean acidification. The IAP statement cautioned against climate engineering as a policy response. Mitigation approaches such as adding chemicals to counter the effects of acidification are likely to be expensive, only partly effective and only at a very local scale, and may pose additional unanticipated risks to the marine environment. There has been very little research on the feasibility and impacts of these approaches. Substantial research is needed before these techniques could be applied. Reports by the WGBU, the UK's Royal Society, and the US National Research Council warned of the potential risks and difficulties associated with climate engineering. Iron fertilization. Iron fertilization of the ocean could stimulate photosynthesis in phytoplankton. The phytoplankton would convert the ocean's dissolved carbon dioxide into carbohydrate and oxygen gas, some of which would sink into the deeper ocean before oxidizing. More than a dozen open-sea experiments confirm that adding iron to the ocean increases photosynthesis in phytoplankton by up to 30 times. While this approach has been proposed as a potential solution to the ocean acidification problem, mitigation of surface ocean acidification might increase acidification in the less inhabited deep ocean. A report by the UK's Royal Society reviewed the approach for effectiveness, affordability, timeliness and safety. The rating for affordability was medium, or not expected to be very cost-effective. For the other three criteria, the ratings ranged from low to very low. For example, in regards to safety, the report found a high potential for undesirable ecological side effects, and that ocean fertilization may increase anoxic regions of ocean. Carbon-negative fuels. Carbonic acid can be extracted from seawater as carbon dioxide for use in making synthetic fuel. If the resulting flue exhaust gas was subject to carbon capture, then the process would be carbon negative over time, resulting in permanent extraction of inorganic carbon from seawater and the atmosphere with which seawater is in equilibrium. Based on the energy requirements, this process was estimated to cost about $50 per ton of CO2. Gallery. See also: biological pump, carbon dioxide sinks, continental shelf pump, estuarine acidification, oceanography. References: Clark, L. A.L. Scenarios of Greenhouse Gas Emissions and Atmospheric Concentrations. Sub-Report 2.1a of Synthesis and Assessment Product 2.1 by the U.S. Climate Change Science Program and the Subcommittee on Global Change Research. Washington, D.C. USA, Department of Energy, Office of Biological and Environmental Researcher, Good, P. A.L. An updated review of developments in climate science research since IPCC-AR4. A report by the Avoid Consortium. London, UK, Committee on Climate Change. Report website. UK Royal Society. Geoengineering the Climate, Science, Governance and Uncertainty. London, UK Royal Society. ISBN A978-85403-773-5 RS Policy Document 10/09. Report website. UNEP. The Emissions Gap Report. Are the Copenhagen Accord pledges sufficient to limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius or 1.5 degrees Celsius? a preliminary assessment. Nairobi, Kenya, United Nations Environment Programme. ISBN A978-92-807-3134-7 USNRC. America's Climate Choices. A report by the Committee on America's Climate Choices, U.S. National Research Council, Washington, D.C., USA, National Academies Press. ISBN A978-0-309-14585-5, WBGU. Special Report, The Future Oceans are warming up, rising high, turning sour. Berlin, Germany, WBGU. ISBN A3-936191-14 ZAM. Report website. Further reading, Antarctic Climate and Ecosystems Cooperative Research Center. Position Analysis, CO2 Emissions and Climate Change, Ocean Impacts and Adaptation Issues. ISSN, 1835-7911. Hobart, Tasmania. Cicerone, R. J. Orr, P. Brewer et al. The Ocean in a High Company, 2 World. EOS, Transactions, American Geophysical Union 85, 351 euro 353. Bibcode, 2004 EOSTR 85 351 C doi, 10.1029/2004 EO 370007 Doney, SC. The Dangers of Ocean Acidification. Scientific American 294, 58 euro 65 doi, 10.1038/Scientific American 0306-58. ISNA 0036-8733. PMIDA 16502612A. Feely, R.A. Sabine, Christopher L. Lee, Kai-Tak. Berylson, Will. Klippers, Joni. Fabry, Victoria J. Milero, Frank J. Impact of Anthropogenic Company, 2 on the Carco, 3 System in the Oceans. Science 305, 362 euro 366. Bibcode, 2004 Sci. 305 362 F doi, 10.1126/Science 1097329. PMIDA 15256664. Harut Khalib, E. Savitz, J. Acid Test, Can We Save Our Oceans from CO2? Oceanair, Henderson, Caspar. Ocean Acidification, The Other CO2 Problem. NewScientist.com News Servicer, Jacobson, M.Z. Studying Ocean Acidification with Conservative, Stable Numerical Schemes for Non-Equilibrium Air-Ocean Exchange and Ocean Equilibrium Chemistry. Journal of Geophysical Research Euro Atmospheres 110, D07302. Bibcode, 2005 JGRD 11007302J doi, 10.1029/2004 JD 005220 Kim, Rakiani. Is a new multilateral environmental agreement on ocean acidification necessary? Review of European Community and International Environmental Law 21, 243 euro 258 doi, 10.1111/Real 12000 exa, Klippers, J.A., R.A. Feely, V.J. Fabry, C. Langdon, C.L. Sabine, and L.L. Robbins. Impacts of Ocean Acidification on Coral Reefs and Other Marine Calcifiers, A Guide for Further Research, report of a workshop held 18 April 20, 2005, St. Petersburg, Florida, sponsored by National Science Foundation, NOAA and the U.S. Geological Survey, 88 pp. Colbert, either. Darkening Sea, Carbon Emissions and the Ocean. The New Yorker, Reeves L., U., V.J. Fabry, L. Hansen and J.P. Gatius. A Guide to Best Practices for Ocean Acidification Research and Data Reporting, 260 P. Luxembourg, Publications Office of the European Union. Sabine, C.L. Feely, Richard A. Gruber, Nicholas. Key, Robert M. Lee, Kai-Tak. Bullista, John L. A. Al. The Oceanic Sink for Anthropogenic Company, 2. Science 305, 367 Euro 371. Bibcode, 2004 Sci. 305 367 Estoi, 10.1126/Science 1097403. PMIDA 15256665 Stone, R.A. World Without Corals. Science 316, 678 Euro 681 doi, 10.1126/Science. 316.58 25.678. PMIDA 17478692 External links, scientific sources, Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center, a project operated by the International Atomic Energy Agency through its environment laboratories, a news stream provided by the Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center, provides daily information on ocean acidification. Subscribe free of charge via email, RSS or Twitter. How Acidification Threatens Oceans from the Inside Out. Scientific American, August 9, 2010 by Mara J. Hart and Calcification, Ocean Acidification Due to Increasing Atmospheric Carbon Dioxide, Report by the Royal Society, AR4WG1 Chapter 5, Oceanic Climate Change and Sea Level, IPCC, State of the Science Fact Sheet, Ocean Acidification, NOAA, Carbon Dioxide Information Analysis Center, the Primary Data Analysis Center of the U.S. Department of Energy, Ocean Acidification Introduction, USGS, Climate Change Threatening the Southern Ocean, Report by CSIRO, The Ocean in a High Company, 2 World, an International Science Symposium Series, The Acid Ocean The Other Problem with Company, 2 Emission, David Archer, A Real Climate Discussion, regularly updated blog of ocean acidification publications and news, Jean-Pierre Gattuso, Task Force on Ocean Acidification in the Pacific, including recent presentations on ocean acidification, Pacific Science Association, Ocean Acidification, a multimedia, interactive site from the World Ocean Observatory, Acidic Oceans, Why Should We Care? Perspectives in Ocean Science, Andrew Dixon, Scripps Institution of Oceanography, Climate Change, Coral Reefs on the Edge. A video presentation by Professor Ove Hugelberg on impact of ocean acidification on coral reefs. Life in the sea found its fate in a paroxysm of extinction. April 30, 2012. Ocean Acidification Virtual Lab, Ocean Acidification, Starting with the Science, a booklet from the Division on Earth and Life Studies of the United States National Research Council, Ocean Acidification, a United States National Academy of Sciences/National Research Council website that includes downloadable figures and interviews with ocean scientists. Ancient Ocean Acidification Intimates Long Recovery from Climate Change, July 22, 2010. Acidification alters fish behavior, higher carbon dioxide in oceans may affect brain chemistry. February 25, 2012. Science News, Coordination of International Research Efforts and Synthesis Activities in Ocean Acidification. IMBA SOLAS, Educational Sites, Ocean Acidification Overview from the Smithsonian Ocean Portal, Understanding Ocean Acidification, Educational Site from Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, Education Team, Scientific Projects, Dr. Francisco Chavez on Ocean Acidification. A Euro-Smithsonian Ocean Portal, European Project of Ocean Acidification, a 4-year-long EU initiative to investigate ocean acidification, biological impacts of ocean acidification, a German initiative funded by BMBF, Ocean Acidification Research Programme, a 5-year-long UK initiative funded by NERC, FRA and DECC, Research Programme on Ocean Acidification at the Cluster of Excellence Future Ocean, Kiel, Ocean Acidification Research Center at University of Alaska Fairbanks. Government sources, Effects of Climate Change and Ocean Acidification on Living Marine Organisms, hearing before the Subcommittee on Oceans, Atmosphere, Fisheries, and Coast Guard of the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, United States Senate, 110th Congress, First Session, May 10, 2007, The Environmental and Economic Impacts of Ocean Acidification, hearing before the Subcommittee on Oceans, Atmosphere, Fisheries, and Coast Guard of the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, United States Senate, 111th Congress, 2nd Session, April 22, 2010. Ocean Acidification Congressional Research Service, Popular Media Sources, Threatening Oceans from the Inside Out. How Acidification Affects Marine Life, Scientific American, The Darkening Sea, article in the New Yorker magazine, November 20, 2006, Growing Acidity of Oceans May Kill Corals, Washington Post, Scientists Grapple with Ocean Acidification, ABC News, Ocean Acidification and Climate, by Clayton Sandel. ABC News, A World Without Whales. By Philippe Cousteau, The Huffington Post, Acid Test, Can We Save Our Oceans from CO2? Oceaner, The Acid Ocean, Stanford University, Sea Change, The Seattle Times, Videos on Ocean Acidification, The Other Company, 2 Problem, an EPOCA-commissioned educational animation created by students from Ridgeway School, Plymouth. Acid Test, The Global Challenge of Ocean Acidification, by Natural Resources Defense Council, A Sea Change, Imagine a World Without Fish, an award-winning documentary and related blog about ocean acidification, Ocean Acidification in a Nutshell, by Greenpeace and Aotearoa New Zealand, Ocean Acidification, An Ecosystem Facing Dissolution by Jomari Helmholtz Center for Ocean Research Kiel, Carbonate System Calculators. The following packages calculate the state of the carbonate system. In seawater, CO2sys, a standalone executable, CCarb, a package for Windows, Mac OS X and Linux, CSYS, a MATLAB script,